March 3, 1944. The air is heavy with the scent of salt and smoke as the sun dips low over the Pacific Ocean, casting a golden hue across the tumultuous sea. Off the coast of Saipan, a small naval base buzzes with restless energy. The sound of clanking metal and distant explosions fills the air, blending with the anxious chatter of sailors. Among them stands John Jack Murphy, a 35-year-old plumber turned engineer. His hands are calloused, etched with the scars of his trade, yet his eyes sparkle with an unyielding determination. He's known for his unconventional ideas, often dismissed as reckless by his superiors. Today, however, something stirs within him, a flicker of inspiration born from desperation. As he watches the horizon, a fleet of Japanese ships looms ominously, a constant threat to American forces. Each vessel represents lives at stake, families torn apart, and the relentless advance of war. Jack's heart races. He recalls the countless failed attempts to devise a weapon that could turn the tide of battle. What if, he mutters to himself, we could sink them without risking more lives? The thought lingers, tantalizing yet terrifying. What he didn't know was that this idea would change the war. If stories like this fascinate you, make sure to hit that subscribe button and comment below. March 3, 1944. The Pacific theater of World War II was a cauldron of conflict. The relentless struggle between the United States and Japan had reached a fever pitch. As tensions escalated, the stakes grew ever higher. The United States Navy, stretched thin and burdened with losses, faced a dire situation. Japanese forces had fortified their positions across islands, threatening supply lines and the very essence of American naval power. The statistics were staggering. Between 1941 and 1944, the U.S. lost over 3,000 ships to enemy action, with the Pacific Campaign claiming more than 25,000 lives. Submarines, once the silent predators of the deep, had suffered significant attrition, losing nearly 350 vessels, each a vessel of hope and firepower. Fleet admirals convened under the weight of despair, grappling with a series of strategic failures. Despite valiant efforts, nothing seemed to stem the tide of Japanese victories. After the Battle of Midway, our losses have been catastrophic, Admiral Chester W. Nimitz stated during a briefing, his voice heavy with resignation. We need a miracle to turn this around. We cannot afford more failures. The room fell silent, the air thick with the consensus of impossibility. Experts agreed it couldn't be done. The Japanese Navy, with its innovative tactics and sophisticated weaponry, had effectively neutralized the American advantage. Their air dominance and naval technology had outpaced U.S. efforts. The once unshakable power of the U.S. fleet felt like a mirage, slipping through the fingers of its commanders. With each passing operation, the cost in lives and resources took its toll, leaving behind an air of despair. The men and women on the front lines faced an enemy that was not only resolute, but embedded in a culture of honor and sacrifice. The scene was grim at the Saipan base, where sailors endured long hours of tension-filled anticipation. As twilight descended, the sound of distant artillery echoed across the water, a dreadful reminder of the ceaseless conflict. Repairs were underway on the battered ships, but every clang of metal against metal carried the weight of uncertainty, amplifying the anxiety around the base. The sailors looked into the eyes of their comrades and saw the reflection of doubt mirrored back. They had faced disappointment before. The development of advanced torpedoes, designed to penetrate the armor of Japanese battleships, had resulted in numerous failures. The Mark 14 torpedo, once hailed as the future of naval warfare, had been plagued by malfunctioning mechanisms and failures to detonate, causing frustration among the fleet. In one notable incident, over a dozen torpedoes fired at the enemy met failure, returning to the fleet with only traces of salt water and embarrassment. Nothing worked, one frustrated commander admitted, his voice a mix of anger and disbelief. The enemy laughs at our technology. We have become a joke in the eyes of the world. The statistics laid bare the truth. American forces were losing ships at an alarming rate, while their Japanese counterparts continued to adapt and innovate. As the sun dipped below the horizon, illuminating the sky in fiery reds and oranges, the ambiance of despair thickened. The sailors shared whispered conversations about their leader's lost confidence. The mood was grim. Each man bore the weight of impending duty, knowing that each mission could be their last. The specter of defeat loomed large, and the uncertainty of survival gnawed at their spirits. Experts, gathered in the dimly lit war rooms, presented their findings with grim faces. Proposals for new tactics and equipment were met with skepticism. It was a cycle of hope and disappointment, with each idea rejected before it could take flight. No one dared to suggest that a new approach could emerge from the most unlikely of places. As the discussions turned to despondency, the air grew heavy with the weight of disappointment. Then a breakthrough came from an unexpected quarter. Among the naval engineers and design teams, the thoughts of a single, unconventional plumber began to take shape. Jack Murphy, with his humble background and unyielding spirit, had been observing the failures of traditional warfare strategies. His hands, accustomed to the mundane tasks of plumbing, were now sketching ideas for something revolutionary. While others dismissed him, he felt an unwavering determination growing within. In the quiet of the workshop, amidst the clutter of tools and parts, Jack contemplated the failures of the Torpedoes. He knew that the current designs were flawed, yet he believed in a possibility lurking beneath the surface. What if we could create something that could truly pierce through their defenses? He pondered, a spark igniting in his mind. The thought felt reckless, but as he envisioned the power of innovation, he felt a rush of hope. The next morning, he sat quietly as the commanders convened, listening intently to the ongoing discussions of failures and the impending doom of another missed opportunity. "That's absurd," one officer sneered at a suggestion from a colleague. "We should stick to what we know. We can't waste resources on unproven ideas." The mood in the room shifted again, the weight of cynicism pressing down on creativity. Yet amid the cacophony of defeated voices, Jack's heart raced with determination. "I will find a way, even if it means facing the doubts of my colleagues," he resolved internally. Though the odds were stacked against him, he carried within him the knowledge that courage could birth innovation, and he was ready to take that leap. As the sun set on Saipan, Jack Murphy's restless spirit refused to succumb to the darkness of despair. He knew he was facing an uphill battle. What he didn't know was that this idea would change the war. If stories like this fascinate you, make sure to hit that subscribe button and comment below. March 5th, 1944. The Pacific Theater, a vast expanse of shimmering blue, was now painted with the blood of brave souls. Amidst this turmoil, in the humble town of San Pedro, California, a seemingly ordinary man was about to challenge the status quo. Harry Jones, a 34-year-old plumber, stood bewildered by the chaos of war. With grease-stained hands and a weary expression, he observed the world around him, feeling a weight of responsibility that most men would overlook. "Why don't we just make them go boom?" he muttered to himself one evening. His tools sprawled across the floor of his cramped workshop. The evening light pierced through the dusty windows, illuminating stacks of blueprints and half-finished projects that spoke of a mind teetering on the brink of brilliance. Harry had always been a tinkerer, a problem solver, but the war had stirred something deeper within him, a sense of urgency to contribute beyond fixing pipes. As he worked, he listened to the radio crackle with news of the ongoing battles. "Our boys are taking heavy losses out there," the announcer's voice echoed, tinged with despair. "Submarines are our only hope against the Japanese fleets." Harry's heart raced. Submarines. They were the silent hunters, yet they had become too predictable, too vulnerable. He turned his thoughts inward. What if there was a way to change that? Weeks passed, and he delved deeper into his idea. What if we could create a torpedo that was more than just a simple weapon, something that could sneak past enemy defenses and strike with precision? He scribbled notes feverishly, sketching concepts and calculating trajectories. The images danced in his mind, a stealthy, untraceable missile that could adapt and respond to the enemy's movements. "Hey, Harry," "You've lost it, man," shouted his neighbor, Jimmy. "You're just a plumber. Stick to fixing leaks." But Harry's resolve only hardened. He saw the desperation in the eyes of the sailors, the fear in their families. He couldn't let his own doubts extinguish the flicker of hope that was igniting within him. One fateful evening, while nursing a cup of coffee, Harry stumbled upon an article detailing the sophisticated technologies being developed in secret military labs. His heart raced as he read about piezoelectric sensors and advanced gyroscopes, the very tools that could help him realize his vision. What if I could combine these with my design, he thought, a spark igniting in his chest. It might work. Fueled by newfound determination, he set off to make connections, first to local engineers, then to naval officers. Harry's enthusiasm, however, was met with skepticism. "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard," scoffed Commander Reynolds, a hardened officer with an air of authority. "You really think a plumber can design a torpedo?" Harry's heart sank, but he refused to back down. "Listen," he said, leaning forward. "I know I'm not a military man, but I understand mechanics. I've spent years figuring out how to make things work. This might be my chance to help." He could see the disbelief etched on Reynolds' face, but behind the skepticism, Harry sensed a flicker of curiosity. "What's the worst that could happen?" he added, his voice steady. Days became weeks, and Harry's passion did not wane. He decided to act alone, pouring his savings into prototypes. Late into the night, he worked tirelessly in his workshop, surrounded by the smell of metal and oil, his fingers dancing over the blueprints as if they were a musical score. Each failure brought more frustration, yet each small success fueled his ambition. "I can't give up," he whispered to himself, driven by a vision that seemed increasingly attainable. Then, one rainy afternoon, everything changed. A knock on the door shattered his concentration. It was Lieutenant Samuels, a naval officer who had caught wind of Harry's relentless pursuit. "I've been hearing whispers about your ideas," Samuel said, his voice low but firm. "You've got the attention of higher-ups. They want to see what you have." In that moment, the weight of Harry's struggle began to lift. "You mean you believe me?" he asked, incredulous. Samuels nodded, a glimmer of respect in his eyes. "But you're going to need to prove it." With a renewed sense of purpose, Harry invited Samuels into his makeshift lab, unveiling his first prototype. The lieutenant's brow furrowed as he examined the device. "It's unconventional," he admitted, "but it just might work." The two collaborated, turning Harry's blueprint into a viable design. They toiled day and night, melding plumbing knowledge with military precision. Samuels provided the technical support necessary to refine Harry's ideas, pushing them closer to a working prototype. The clock was ticking. The war didn't wait for innovation. "Harry, we need to make this count. Lives depend on it," Samuels urged during one late-night session, sweat beading on his forehead as they adjusted the device. The urgency in the air was palpable, charged with the hum of possibilities and the sound of distant explosions echoing the ongoing war. As they prepared for the first test, a mix of excitement and dread enveloped Harry. What if it fails? He thought, the self-doubt creeping back in. Yet as he stood on the shore, watching the waves crash against the hull of the test vessel, he felt a new sense of clarity. "No matter the outcome, I've done everything I could. This is my contribution." When the day arrived, Harry stood beside Samuels, adrenaline coursing through their veins. The prototype was armed and ready. "On my mark," Samuels instructed, and Harry held his breath. With a swift command, the device was launched into the water, its streamlined shape cutting through the waves with unparalleled grace. A moment of silence enveloped them, before a distant explosion ripped through the air. They both turned, eyes wide with disbelief and triumph. "It worked!" Samuel shouted, and in that instant Harry felt his heart swell with pride. He had proven the naysayers wrong. The torpedo was not just a dream anymore. It was a tangible weapon that could change the tide of war. What he didn't know was that this idea would change the war. Harry's journey was just beginning. But he had taken the first monumental step. If you're hooked on this story, hit that subscribe button. March 15th, 1944, San Pedro, California. The air was thick with the scent of salt and oil, a stark contrast to the turmoil echoing across the Pacific. Harry Jones sat in his cramped workshop surrounded by an assortment of tools and half-finished projects. The flickering light from a single bulb cast shadows that danced hauntingly on the walls. He clenched a wrench, staring at his blueprints, a makeshift design for a revolutionary torpedo. Doubts gnawed at him like a relentless tide, but there was no turning back now. "Harry, you can't be serious," came a familiar voice. It was Tom, his closest friend and fellow mechanic, a burly man with laughter lines that betrayed his worry. "You're talking about building a weapon in your garage. The military will laugh you out." "Let them laugh," Harry replied, his voice steady. "We need something that works, something that can change this war. We can't keep losing men like this." The determination in Harry's eyes sparked a glimmer of hope in Tom, but the weight of skepticism hung heavily between them. "All right, I'm in," Tom said reluctantly. "But if we're doing this, we need to be smart about it." That night, under the dim glow of the workshop light, the two men began their secret endeavor. They gathered supplies, scrounging parts from old vehicles and surplus warehouses. Each piece they salvaged felt like a step closer to a dream. Yet the stakes were insurmountably high. Should anyone discover their operation, they would face dire consequences. Days turned into nights as they worked tirelessly, testing and modifying Harry's designs. They encountered setback after setback. The first prototype, a crude amalgamation of pipes and explosives, failed ignominiously when it detonated prematurely. The explosion rattled the workshop, leaving a cloud of dust and smoke in its wake. "Back to the drawing board," Harry muttered, wincing at the mess they had created. He felt the weight of despair creeping in again. This was no mere hobby. It was the potential salvation of countless lives. "We'll get it right," Tom reassured him, brushing ash off his shirt. "Every failure is just a lesson we're learning." As they continued refining their prototype, they reached out to a few trusted engineers and scientists willing to entertain their unconventional idea. Among them was Captain David Mitchell, a maverick thinker with connections in the Naval Command. He was intrigued by Harry's audacious plan, urging them to take their prototype to a secluded testing location. "Gentlemen, if you believe this can work, then let's put it to the test," Captain Mitchell said, his voice a blend of authority and excitement. "I've seen too many men fall in battle. It's time we change the narrative." On March 20th, they gathered at a dilapidated dock, the sun hanging low in the sky, casting a golden hue on the water. The atmosphere buzzed with anticipation as the prototype sat on a makeshift launch pad. Harry and Tom were a bundle of nerves, their hearts racing with both fear and hope. "Ready?" Tom asked, his hands trembling slightly. "As ready as we'll ever be," Harry responded, swallowing hard. The captain stood nearby, flanked by a small team of engineers, their gazes fixed on the sleek, albeit imperfect, torpedo. "Initiate launch sequence," he commanded, his voice steady despite the tension. With a deep breath, Harry activated the launch mechanism. The torpedo jolted forward, slicing through the water with surprising grace. Time seemed to stretch as they watched it vanish into the depths. Moments later, the surface erupted in a massive explosion, sending plumes of water skyward. Cheers erupted from the onlookers. "We did it! We actually did it!" Tom shouted, his voice cracking with disbelief, pulling Harry into an exuberant embrace. But Harry's mind raced, calculating the implications. "One test isn't enough. We need to refine this further." Captain Mitchell approached, his face a mixture of excitement and focus. "This is just the beginning, gentlemen. We need to prepare for a full-scale operation." Over the next few weeks, they worked tirelessly, implementing adjustments based on the initial test. Each step forward was met with a mixture of hope and anxiety. Doubts crept in again, but the undeniable success of the first test propelled them onward. They were on the brink of something unprecedented. As they prepared for their next phase, Harry felt a swell of emotion. His thoughts drifted to the families of soldiers fighting overseas, to the lives that hung in the balance. If this could save even one man, he whispered to himself, the weight of his mission bearing down on him. On April 10th, they conducted the second test. This time, the torpedo was loaded with enhanced explosives and fitted with a more reliable guidance system. As they gathered at the dock, the air buzzed with anticipation, each heartbeat echoing the collective hope of those present. "Launch!" Captain Mitchell commanded, his voice cutting through the tension. The torpedo shot forward, gliding over the waves with newfound precision. The impact of the underwater explosion was far more powerful than before, an explosion that sent a ripple of exhilaration through the crowd. "Yes! Yes!" Tom shouted, fists pumping into the air. But just as cheers erupted, Harry felt an unfamiliar anxiety. "We need to test it in real conditions, at sea, against enemy vessels," he urged. Captain Mitchell nodded, seeing the importance of the next step. "We'll arrange for field tests in the Pacific. This could change everything." The exhilaration of success mingled with the weight of responsibility. Harry and Tom exchanged glances, both knowing the stakes had never been higher. "If you're hooked on this story, hit that subscribe button." The voice echoed silently in Harry's mind, knowing their journey was far from over. With the sun setting behind them, Harry reflected on how far they had come. They were no longer just mechanics in a workshop. They were pioneers on the brink of turning the tide of war. What had begun as a reckless idea was evolving into a beacon of hope, a chance to save lives where before there had been only despair. In that moment, hope ignited within Harry, fueling his desire to push forward, knowing that the true battle was still ahead. March 12th, 1944, San Pedro, California. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows in the cramped office of the U.S. Navy's 12th Naval District. The air felt charged, thick with anticipation as Harry Jones, the plumber turned inventor, stood before a panel of officers, their faces a mix of skepticism and curiosity. His heart pounded against his chest, a steady reminder of the monumental task ahead. "Gentlemen, I stand before you not just as a plumber, but as someone who believes we can turn the tide of this war," Harry declared, his voice steady yet laced with urgency. He rolled out a large blueprint across the table, the faint smell of oil lingering in the air. The design was simple yet revolutionary, a torpedo that could be launched from a submarine, equipped with a unique mechanism to enhance its precision. Captain McAllister, a hardened veteran with a furrowed brow, examined the plans with a critical eye. "You want us to trust a plumbing system to take down enemy ships? This is the stupidest thing I've ever heard," he scoffed, his voice echoing in the small room. Harry's heart sank, but he pressed on, a flicker of determination igniting within him. "Sir, with respect, traditional torpedoes have a failure rate of nearly 50%. My design, it could change that." The officers exchanged doubtful glances. Commander Harris leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "And what makes you think your idea will work when others have failed? You're a plumber, not a weapon engineer." "I understand your doubts," Harry responded, his voice rising with passion. "But sometimes it takes an outsider's perspective to see what's possible. I may not have a military background, but I've spent years fixing leaks and ensuring systems work as they should." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "In war, we can't afford to rely on outdated methods. We need innovation." The room fell silent as the officers absorbed his plea. The tension was palpable, an invisible barrier separating Harry from their acceptance. Then, breaking the stillness, Lieutenant Thompson, a young officer with keen eyes, spoke up. "What's the worst that could happen if we test it? We're losing ships left and right. If there's even a chance." Captain McAllister shot him a sharp look. "We can't gamble with lives on an unproven theory." "Or we can keep losing ships and men," Thompson countered, his voice steady. "Let's at least explore the possibility. A small test won't hurt." A murmur of agreement rippled through the group. Harry seized the momentum, his heart racing. "If you allow me to conduct a test, I'll prove that my design works. Just give me the chance." After a tense silence, Captain McAllister sighed, his resolve wavering. "All right, Jones, you'll have one shot, but know this. If you fail, you'll answer for every ship lost because of your folly. I won't fail, Harry vowed. Determination etched across his face. Days later, the air surrounding the naval base buzzed with energy. Harry hurriedly assembled his prototype, a fusion of everyday plumbing components and ingenious engineering. Each piece was meticulously crafted, reflecting his newfound purpose. He had enlisted the help of a few fellow workers, a ragtag group of engineers and mechanics who believed in his vision. They labored tirelessly, fueled by a shared dream of turning the tide against the Japanese fleet. As the sun rose on March 20th, 1944, the team gathered at the pier, their breaths forming white clouds in the cool morning air. The ocean lay calm, a deceptive tranquility masking the chaos of war. Harry felt the weight of every soul relying on his success. "Are you ready?" one of the mechanics questioned, glancing nervously at the prototype. Harry nodded, his heart racing. "Let's make history." They loaded the torpedo onto a test submarine, the vessel creaking under the weight of hope and desperation. As they submerged, Harry's mind raced with thoughts of what lay ahead. Would it work? Would it save lives and ships? He clenched his fists, forcing himself to focus on the moment. "Release the torpedo," Harry commanded, adrenaline surging through his veins. The crew followed his orders, and for a heartbeat, time seemed to stand still. The torpedo shot forward, slicing through the water like a bullet. Harry watched, breath held. As it sped towards the target, a floating dummy ship set for the test. Then, the world exploded in a cacophony of sound. The underwater detonation sent shockwaves rippling through the water, and cheers erupted from the crew as they realized the test had succeeded. The dummy ship disintegrated in a spray of foam and debris. Harry felt a surge of elation. "It works! It really works!" he shouted, fighting back tears of joy. Their triumph, however, was short-lived. Reports flooded in from the front lines about the continuing loss of ships, and soon after, Harry found himself back in the office with the brass. The atmosphere was tense, heavy with expectation. "Gentlemen," Harry began, standing before the panel once more, his heart racing. "The test was a success. With our new torpedo, we can significantly reduce losses." "Did it actually sink anything worth mentioning?" Captain McAllister interrupted, his tone cold. Harry straightened. "In simulations, we achieved an accuracy increase of 85% over standard torpedoes. Our losses could be cut dramatically." The officers exchanged glances, skepticism still etched on their faces. "We need real-world results, not just simulations," Commander Harris argued, his voice rising. "We can't risk lives on a theory." "Lives are already being lost," Harry nearly shouted, desperation seeping into his words. "Let us take this to the front lines. Give me just one opportunity. Let me show you what we can do." The room fell into a heavy silence. Then slowly, Captain McAllister spoke. "Very well, Jones. You'll have your chance. Prepare for a full operation. But I warn you, if you fail—" "I won't fail," Harry promised, his resolve unwavering. The stage was set, and soon, Harry's invention would face its greatest test, not just against the waves but against the unforgiving reality of war, that demanded nothing less than victory. As they prepared for the operation, Harry felt the weight of the world on his shoulders, not just for himself, but for every sailor, every family waiting back home. They were counting on him. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. "We're going to change this war," he whispered to himself, determination igniting a fire in his chest. "If you're hooked on this story, hit that subscribe button." April 22nd, 1944. Washington, D.C., a city shrouded in uncertainty and anticipation. The air in the Pentagon's conference room was thick with tension as the high-ranking military officials gathered for a pivotal meeting. Generals and admirals, their crisp uniforms adorned with medals, sat around a large oak table, their expressions a mix of skepticism and curiosity. The walls were lined with maps, red marks indicating recent naval losses, while the distant echoes of war reverberated outside. Harry Jones, the unlikely hero, stood nervously at the head of the table, clutching a stack of documents. His heart raced. This was his moment, the culmination of sleepless nights and relentless effort. "Gentlemen," he began, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment, "I believe I have a solution to our submarine problem." The room fell silent, eyes narrowing at the sight of the plumber who dared to challenge their expertise. "A plumber?" scoffed Admiral Thompson, a seasoned veteran with a reputation for dismissing unorthodox ideas. "What could you possibly know about naval warfare?" Harry swallowed hard, feeling the heat of their scrutiny. "I know how to make things explode," he replied, his confidence bolstered by desperation. He laid out his plan for the innovative torpedo, his fingers tracing diagrams he'd sketched in the margins of his notes. "This design uses a new propulsion system that enhances speed and accuracy. It could turn the tide against the Japanese fleet." Another general, his brow furrowed, interjected, "You're suggesting we trust a plumber's invention over decades of naval engineering expertise? That's absurd." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room, skepticism hanging heavy in the air. As Harry's heart sank, he recalled the faces of his comrades, their weary smiles, the way they held their families close despite the threat of war. "I understand your doubts," he said, his voice rising above the din. "But what's absurd is standing by while our men and ships are lost. We need to act now." The tension in the room thickened as a battle of wills commenced. General Roberts, a man known for his strategic brilliance, leaned forward. "You've made quite a claim, Mr. Jones. But we won't base our operations on hope. We need results." "Results?" Harry echoed, a fire igniting within him. "Then let's test it. We can conduct a trial run. If it fails, you'll never hear from me again, but if it works—" He paused, the weight of possibility hanging in the air. "If it works, we could save countless lives." Admiral Thompson's eyes flicked to the other officers, gauging their reactions. "A trial run without proper oversight? This is reckless. Unless," Harry suggested, "you're willing to risk more lives in the field by sticking to the same outdated methods." The tension crackled like static electricity, the room split between tradition and innovation. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, General Roberts broke the silence. "Very well, we'll authorize a test, but you will be held accountable for this experiment. No mistakes, Mr. Jones." "Thank you, sir," Harry breathed, relief washing over him. Yet the weight of expectation settled heavily on his shoulders. As he walked out of the Pentagon, the bright sunlight felt blinding. The path ahead was fraught with uncertainty, but now he had a chance to prove himself. He had to make it work. May 5, 1944, a secluded naval testing facility, a stark contrast to the chaos that ensued in the Pacific. The atmosphere buzzed with anticipation as Harry, flanked by a small team of engineers and a skeptical lieutenant, prepared for the first test of his revolutionary torpedo. "Is it supposed to look that way?" the lieutenant asked, eyeing the prototype nervously. It was an odd-looking device with protruding fins and an unconventional shape. "It looks like a plumbing nightmare." Harry chuckled, a nervous energy coursing through him. "Just wait. It's not about looks. It's what's inside that counts." He watched as the engineers connected the final wires, adrenaline surging through his veins. "Ready when you are," one of the engineers called out, stepping back. "Here goes nothing," Harry said, his voice barely above a whisper. With a deep breath, he activated the launch mechanism. The torpedo shot forward, a sleek missile slicing through the water. For a moment, time stood still as all eyes followed its trajectory. Suddenly, a loud explosion erupted in the distance. Gasps filled the air, then cheers erupted. The torpedo had hit the target. "We did it!" Harry shouted, disbelief washing over him. The room erupted in applause, the lieutenant's skeptical demeanor cracking into a smile. "Let's try again," Harry said, his determination renewed. They conducted test after test, achieving remarkable success each time. As reports of their findings circulated, enthusiasm built among the ranks. June 10, 1944. The excitement culminated in a high-stakes conference at the Navy Command. Generals gathered, their faces strained yet hopeful. The room hummed with energy. As Harry stood again before the brass, this time with results in hand. "Gentlemen," he began, "in our trials, we've seen a reduction in losses by 85%. Our new torpedo can change the course of this war." He presented the data, charts illustrating the stark contrast between previous losses and those achieved with his invention. General Roberts nodded, a smile breaking through his usually stoic expression. "This is impressive, Mr. Jones. You've proven your critics wrong." The Admiral, still wary, leaned forward. "But we need to see it in action, against real enemy subs. A test in combat." Harry's heart raced. "I'm ready. I'll lead the charge." As the approval echoed through the room, a wave of exhilaration washed over him. This was validation, not just of his invention, but of his determination to fight against the odds. The new torpedo would be unleashed in the Pacific, a beacon of hope amidst the darkness of war. And even as the tensions of battle loomed ahead, Harry felt a sense of unity with those who had stood by him through disbelief and doubt. With each passing day, they prepared for the ultimate test. Harry's heart swelled with a newfound sense of purpose. He had faced the storm of skepticism and emerged victorious. Now the real battle awaited, one that could shape the course of history. As the sun set on the horizon, casting a golden hue over the ocean, Harry gazed at the waves, whispering a promise to himself and his fellow soldiers. "We will make them go boom." August 15th, 1945. A new dawn broke over the Pacific, the sun rising with a heavy heart. As Japan announced its surrender, the echoes of victory were mixed with the somber reminder of sacrifice. Harry Jones, the plumber who had defied expectations, stood amidst a world forever altered. The torpedo he spearheaded, the reckless design, had played a pivotal role, sinking 47 Japanese ships and changing the tide of war. In the war's aftermath, Jones returned to San Pedro, a quiet man grappling with the enormity of his contribution. He walked the same streets, but now they seemed different, the air tinged with both relief and lingering sorrow. He often found himself at the local coffee shop, where whispers of wartime heroics buzzed around him. "Did you hear about that plumber?" a patron would say, eyes wide with admiration, unaware that the hero sat just a table away, lost in thought. The war had ended, but the scars remained. Countries mourned their losses, families grieved their dead, and soldiers returned home, some never to be the same. While the world celebrated victory, Harry grappled with an inner turmoil. The laughter of children playing outside contrasted sharply with the nightmares that haunted him at night, visions of ships aflame and the faces of those who did not return. "Did I do enough?" he often pondered, wrestling with the moral weight of his invention. In the months following the war, the U.S. Navy conducted retrospective analyses, revealing staggering statistics. The integration of Jones's torpedo design led to a marked reduction in naval casualties, with loss rates plummeting by 85%. It was a triumph, yet for Jones, the numbers felt abstract against the human cost. He sometimes found solace in volunteering at veterans organizations, sharing his experiences and listening to others. Their stories of bravery and loss mirrored his own. "Harry, you saved lives," a fellow veteran, John, reassured him during one gathering. "You did what many couldn't even dream of." But Harry remained unconvinced. "I just did what I thought was right. The war changed me and I can't shake it off," he replied, voice heavy with emotion. This conflict between self-worth and the consequences of innovation plagued him daily. Years passed, and in 1955, the government awarded Jones a commendation for his contributions. As he stood on a makeshift stage, facing a sea of faces eager to celebrate him, Harry couldn't shake the feeling of being an imposter. The applause felt hollow, the accolades undeserved. "I'm not a hero," he murmured to the crowd. "I'm just a plumber who had an idea." The audience fell silent, and for a moment the air was thick with contemplation. The recognition, however, ignited a spark within him. Harry began to understand that humanity's greatest strength lay not solely in its capacity for destruction, but in its ability to innovate for peace. He started mentoring young engineers and inventors, sharing not just the technical aspects of his work, but the ethical implications of creation. "What you create should save lives, not take them," he would tell them, eyes fervent with belief. His legacy extended beyond the torpedo itself. Harry became an advocate for responsible invention, speaking at conferences, writing articles, and engaging in discussions about the moral responsibilities of innovators. His words resonated, encouraging many to reflect on their roles in shaping the world. "Innovation doesn't need credentials. It needs courage," he would often affirm, leading to standing ovations and discussions that lingered long after he left the stage. Harry established a scholarship in his name for budding engineers, prioritizing those with a passion for humanitarian-focused technology. "I hope you use your skills to make the world a better place," he wrote in the program's introduction. The scholarship blossomed with applicants eager to follow his path of marrying innovation with integrity. In the quiet moments of reflection, Harry would often return to the beach where he first envisioned his idea. The gentle waves lapping at the shore mirrored the ebb and flow of his thoughts. He understood now that courage was not simply about daring greatly in the face of war, but also about nurturing compassion in the aftermath. "If my invention saves just one life, it was worth it," he told himself, finding peace in the notion that his idea, reckless as it seemed, had sparked a wave of change. As the years folded into decades, Harry faded from the headlines but not from the hearts of those he inspired. His modest lifestyle belied the monumental impact he had made. He remained grounded, continuing to work as a plumber, believing every pipe he patched was an opportunity to contribute to the greater good. In his mind, he was just a man doing a job, but in truth, he was so much more. In 1994, at the age of 84, Harry passed away quietly in his home, surrounded by family. His obituary honored the man who had transformed a moment of inspiration into a legacy of courage and compassion. The community mourned deeply, sharing stories of how his innovative spirit had touched their lives. "He was just an ordinary man with an extraordinary heart," one neighbor remarked, encapsulating the essence of Harry's journey. In the end, Harry Jones left behind more than just a torpedo. He cultivated an ethos of responsibility within innovation. His story became a beacon for future generations, reminding them that even the most improbable hero can change the world through courage, compassion, and an unwavering commitment to humanity. What impossible ideas do you think could change the world? Comment below. The moral of Harry's journey is clear. Innovation doesn't require extraordinary credentials. It requires the courage to act in the face of adversity and to uplift humanity.